The message arrived on a cold Tuesday morning in the year 2387. It came through every communication channel Earth possessed, breaking through firewalls and security systems like they were made of paper. The Galactic Council had spoken, and they expected humanity to listen. Admiral Una Park stood in the command center of Earth's orbital defense station, reading the message for the third time. Her face showed nothing. After 30 years in the military, she had learned to hide her emotions behind a wall of ice. But inside, something burned. "They're summoning us," she said quietly. "Like we're children, being called to the principal's office." The message was clear. Earth's representatives were ordered to appear before the Galactic Council within 30 standard days. The matter was described as urgent and non-negotiable. For 300 years, humanity had known about alien life. The first contact had not been friendly. It had not been the beautiful moment of unity that old movies had promised. Instead, it had been a cold announcement that Earth was now classified as a Tier 7 developing species and would be restricted to its own solar system until further notice. The Council controlled everything beyond the stars. 47 species sat on its ruling body, and they had decided long ago that humans were not worthy of joining them. Too violent, they said. Too unpredictable. Too young. So humanity had been locked in a cage made of laws they never agreed to. They watched as alien ships passed through their solar system without stopping. They heard about the wonders of the galaxy through stolen transmissions. And they waited. But 6 months ago, everything changed. Dr. Hana Choi, a physicist working in a small research station near Neptune, had made an impossible discovery. Her team had found something hidden in the fabric of space itself. It was a network of pathways, invisible threads that connected distant points in the universe. The aliens called them void gates. They were the greatest secret in the galaxy, and the Council had hidden them from humanity for 3 centuries. Now the Council knew that humans had found their secret, and they were not happy. Ambassador Minho Kang arrived at the orbital station 2 days before the delegation was scheduled to leave. He was a tall man in his 50s, with gray hair and tired eyes that had seen too much. Before he became a diplomat, he had been a soldier. Before that, he had been a husband and a father. He was neither of those things anymore. "Admiral Park," he greeted her with a small nod. "I've read the briefing. The Council wants us to hand over everything we've learned about the Void Gates." "They want more than that," Una replied. She pulled up a holographic display, showing the full text of the Council's demands. "They want us to delete all research data. They want to place observers on Earth to ensure compliance. And they want us to sign something called a Supervised Integration Agreement." Minho studied the document. His expression did not change, but his hands tightened into fists at his sides. "Supervised integration," he repeated slowly. "That's a nice way of saying they want to put a leash on us." Yes, the journey to the Council station took 18 days through normal space. Humans were not permitted to use the void gates, so they traveled the slow way, watching as alien vessels blinked past them and vanished into pathways they could see but not touch. The Council chamber was located on a massive station called Orion Prime. It floated in neutral space, a monument to galactic cooperation that humanity had never been invited to join. When the human delegation arrived, they were made to wait for 6 hours before being allowed to dock. Minho used the time to prepare. He reviewed files on every Council species, memorizing their habits and weaknesses. He studied the layout of the chamber and planned his words carefully. He thought about his wife Jisoo and his daughter Nari, and he felt the old pain rise up in his chest before pushing it back down. They had died 15 years ago in what the Council called an unfortunate incident. Human colonists on Titan had expanded their settlement beyond the boundaries the Council had set. In response, the Council had authorized a corrective action. 3,000 humans had died in a single night, burned alive by ships that came without warning. The Council had sent their regrets. They had offered compensation. They had expected humanity to accept and move on. Minho had not moved on. He had simply learned to wait. The council chamber was enormous. It was a circular room with seats rising in tiers around a central platform where the accused were meant to stand. Because that was what humans were in this room. They were not guests. They were not equals. They were defendants in a trial they had never agreed to. High Arbiter Velkos sat at the highest point of the chamber. He was ancient. His body, more machine than flesh, after thousands of years of life extension. He looked down at the human delegation with eyes that held no warmth. "You have been summoned to answer for your violations," Velkos announced. His voice echoed through the chamber. "Your species has accessed forbidden knowledge. You have broken the laws that govern this galaxy." Minho stood on the central platform with Admiral Park beside him. Around them, 47 species watched and waited. "The Council demands the following," Velkos continued. "All research related to Void Gate technology will be surrendered. All data will be deleted under our supervision. Earth will accept permanent observers to ensure compliance, and your species will sign the Supervised Integration Agreement, placing humanity under Council guidance for the next 500 years. Silence fell over the chamber. Every alien expected the humans to argue, to beg, to negotiate for better terms. That was how it always worked. Lesser species always tried to bargain. Minho looked at the faces around him. He thought about 300 years of being ignored. He thought about Titan. He thought about his daughter's face. Then he stood up straighter and spoke in a clear, calm voice that carried to every corner of the chamber. "Earth declines." The silence that followed was so complete that Minho could hear his own heartbeat. High Arbiter Velkos stared at him as if he had spoken in a language that did not exist. "I'm sorry," Velkos said slowly. "Yes." Minho turned and began walking toward the exit. Admiral Park fell into step beside him. "We decline your terms. We decline your observers. We decline your agreement. And we decline to negotiate." They left the chamber without looking back. Behind them, chaos erupted. 3 months passed after the humans walked out of the council chamber. In that time, the galaxy held its breath and waited for what would come next. Nothing came. Earth went completely silent. Every communication channel that had connected humanity to the rest of the galaxy was shut down overnight. Human ships that had been traveling through permitted space turned around and went home. The few human traders and workers living on alien stations packed their belongings and left without saying goodbye. It was as if humanity had simply vanished. High Arbiter Velkos sat in his private chamber and stared at reports that made no sense. His advisors had assured him that the humans would come back within a week. They would apologize. They would negotiate. They would accept whatever terms the council offered because they had no choice. But the humans did not come back. "Send probes to their solar system," Velkos ordered. "I want to know what they are doing." The probes were sent. Some of them returned with corrupted data that showed only static and meaningless numbers. Others did not return at all. Fear began to spread through the council like a disease. Captain Do-Hyun Lee sat in a small bar on Trading Station Kappa 9, listening to the conversations around him. He was a human spy, one of the few who had stayed behind when the others left. His job was simple. He was supposed to watch, listen, and when the time was right, make things worse. "I heard they found something near Jupiter," a drunk merchant whispered to his friend at the next table. "Something big. The council tried to send a scout ship, and it just disappeared." "Disappeared how?" "Just gone. No explosion. No distress signal. Gone." Do-Hyun smiled into his drink. The rumor was not entirely true, but that did not matter. Truth was less important than fear. And fear was spreading faster than any plague. He had been feeding these stories for weeks. A whisper here. A hint there. Nothing that could be traced back to him, but enough to make aliens nervous. Enough to make them imagine the worst. Back on Earth, Dr. Hana Choi worked without sleep. She had not left her laboratory for 11 days. Empty coffee cups covered her desk, and her eyes were red from staring at screens. But she could not stop. She was too close. Project Horizon had been just a theory 3 months ago. Now it was almost complete. The Council thinks they can threaten us because they control the Void Gates, she had told the Earth Defense Committee during her first presentation, but they don't understand what the gates really are. They use them like doors, opening and closing at fixed points. They never asked what would happen if you opened a door to nowhere. And the committee had listened. They had funded her work without asking too many questions. They understood that survival sometimes required weapons that made enemies afraid to attack. Hana looked at the latest test results and felt a chill run down her spine. The weapon worked. It worked better than she had expected. And now, she had to live with what she had created. Far away from Earth, Delegate Tora stood before a window in her quarters on Orion Prime and watched the stars. She was young by the standards of her species, barely 200 years old, but she remembered what her grandmother had told her about the old days. "We were like the humans once," her grandmother had said. Small. Ignored. The Council let raiders burn our colonies for 3 generations before they decided we were worth protecting. By then, half our people were dead. Tora had been watching the humans carefully since they refused the Council's demands. She did not see madness in their actions. She saw something else. She saw a species that had decided it would rather die standing than live on its knees. Part of her hoped they would succeed. The Council met in emergency session every week now. The meetings always ended the same way, with arguments and accusations, but no decisions. Some species wanted to send a military fleet to Earth, immediately. Others warned that attacking an unknown enemy was foolish. A few quietly suggested that perhaps the Council should offer better terms. "They are primitive," High Arbiter Velkos insisted. "They cannot have built anything that threatens us. This silence is a bluff." "Then, explain the probes," demanded Admiral Kreth of the Vorn Empire. "Explain why our scouts disappear near their system. Equipment failure. 17 times?" Velkos had no answer. The truth was that no one knew what the humans were doing, and that not knowing was driving the Council insane. For thousands of years, they had controlled information. They had decided who learned, what, and when. The idea that a Tier 7 species could hide something from them was impossible to accept. And yet, the silence continued. On the 93rd day of human silence, a message arrived at Orion Prime. It came through a channel that should not have existed, bypassing every security system the Council had built. The message contained only 2 things: a set of coordinates in a distant, empty star system, and a date, exactly 14 days in the future. There was no explanation, no demands, no threats, just coordinates and a date. Velkos stared at the message for a long time. His advisors argued about what it meant. Some said it was a trap. Others said it was a surrender. A few suggested ignoring it entirely. But Velkos understood something that the others did not. He had ruled for 3,000 years. He had seen species rise and fall. He had watched empires crumble and new powers emerge. And he recognized what this message was. It was an invitation. The humans were not surrendering. They were not begging. They were telling the Council to come and watch something. They wanted an audience. "Prepare ships for all Council delegations," Velkos ordered. "We will go to these coordinates." "Is that wise?" one advisor asked. Velkos did not answer. He was thinking about the human ambassador's face in the Council chamber 3 months ago. There had been no fear in those eyes. No desperation. Only patience. The patience of someone who knew exactly what was coming. For the first time in centuries, High Arbiter Velkos felt something he had forgotten existed. Doubt. The Kepler wasteland was a dead place. No planets worth colonizing. No resources worth mining. Just a dying red star surrounded by rocks and dust that no species had ever claimed. 47 Council delegations arrived at the coordinates exactly on time. Their ships filled the empty space, like a nervous crowd gathering to watch something they did not understand. They kept their weapons ready and their shields raised. And then, they saw the human fleet. Commander Sora Jin stood on the bridge of the HSS Defiance and watched the alien vessels arrive. She was 34 years old, the youngest fleet commander in Earth's history. Some said she had risen too fast. Others said she had earned her position through a combination of brilliance and ruthlessness that scared even her superiors. Contact from High Arbiter Velkos, her communications officer reported. He's demanding to know the purpose of this gathering. Sora smiled. Tell him to wait. The Admiral will speak when she's ready. On the command ship HSS Resolution, Admiral Una Park finished her preparations. She checked her uniform, adjusted her collar, and looked at herself in the mirror. Today would change everything. Today, humanity would stop being prey. Ambassador Minho Kang stood beside her. Are you sure about this? He asked quietly. No, Una admitted. But I'm sure about what happens if we don't. The Council will never leave us alone. They'll keep pushing until we either submit or fight. At least this way, we choose when and how. She turned and walked to the broadcast center. Every ship in the human fleet was connected. Every Council vessel would receive her transmission. The entire galaxy was watching. This is Admiral Una Park of the Earth Defense Force, she announced. Her voice was calm and steady. You came because you received our invitation. You came because you wanted to know what humanity has been building in silence. Watch carefully. We will only demonstrate once. The Council ships waited. Sensors focused on the human fleet, trying to scan their vessels, trying to understand their technology. But the readings made no sense. The human ships seemed to bend light around them, appearing solid one moment and ghostly the next. Lieutenant Junho Beck sat at his tactical station on the Defiance, his hands steady on the controls. He was 26 years old. His parents had died when he was a child, killed by alien pirates who raided their refugee transport. The Council had investigated. They had expressed regret. They had done nothing. Now, Junho was about to show them what nothing felt like. Target acquired, he reported. Awaiting orders. Commander Sora looked at the display. The target was a barren moon orbiting the fourth planet in the system. No life. No value. Just rock and ice, floating in space. Fire, she ordered. What happened next would be remembered for 10,000 years. A single beam of light shot from the Defiance. It touched the moon for less than a heartbeat. And then, the moon was gone. Not destroyed. Not exploded. Gone. There was no debris. No cloud of dust. No slowly expanding ring of fragments. One moment the moon existed. The next moment it did not. As if someone had simply erased it from reality. Silence filled every bridge in the Council fleet. Sensors searched desperately for any trace of the moon that had been there seconds ago. They found nothing. The space where the moon had been was simply empty. Delegate Tora stood on her ship and felt her hearts pounding in her chest. She had seen weapons before. She had witnessed the power of Council fleets, destroying rebellions and crushing resistance. But she had never seen anything like this. They weaponized the void gates, she whispered to herself. They're opening doors to nowhere. She was right. Dr. Hana Choi had discovered what the Council had never understood. The void gates were not just transportation. They were holes in the universe. And anything that went through a hole could be sent anywhere, even to places that did not exist. The humans had built a weapon that made things disappear. Not destroyed, not killed, just removed from existence, sent to a void between realities where nothing could survive. Admiral Park's voice returned to the broadcast. The Council has spent 3 centuries treating humanity as children. You hid the stars from us. You let raiders attack our colonies and called it natural selection. You offered us a leash and called it integration. On every Council ship, alien commanders listened in growing horror. We declined your offer because we do not negotiate with those who see us as less than them. You cannot negotiate with someone who thinks you are worthless. You can only show them that they were wrong. High Arbiter Velkos finally found his voice. This is an act of war, he sputtered. You have revealed a weapon of mass destruction. The Council will not tolerate this threat, Ambassador Minho Kang answered. We have revealed nothing except our ability to defend ourselves. We destroyed an empty moon in an empty system. No one was harmed. But now, you know what we can do. He paused, and when he spoke again, his voice was hard as stone. The galaxy is not your property to control. The stars do not belong to you, and humanity will no longer ask permission to exist. One by one, the human ships began to vanish. Not jumping through void gates, simply fading from sight. Their advanced stealth technology, making them invisible to every sensor the Council possessed. Within minutes, the human fleet was gone. The Council ships remained alone in the Kepler wasteland, surrounded by empty space, where a moon had once existed. Delegate Tora made a decision in that moment. She walked to her communication console and began recording a message. It was addressed to the human embassy channel that had been silent for 3 months. My name is Tora, she said quietly. I want to help. Somewhere in the darkness between stars, a human intelligence officer received her message. He smiled and began composing a reply. The galaxy would never be the same. The demonstration in the Kepler wasteland broke the Galactic Council like a hammer hitting glass. Within 48 hours of returning to Orion Prime, 12 species announced their withdrawal from the Council. They had watched the moon disappear. They had seen the look on High Arbiter Velkos's face. And they had decided that following the Council into war against humanity was suicide. We came to this council for protection, the representative of the Meridian people declared before walking out of the chamber. You cannot protect us from a weapon that erases things from existence. We will seek our own arrangements with Earth. Ambassador Minho Kang received the first delegation 3 days later aboard the HSS New Seoul, a diplomatic vessel that had been hidden in deep space for months. The Meridians came with gifts and apologies. They spoke of their own history with the Council, of promises broken and grievances ignored. Minho listened to everything. He accepted nothing immediately. And when they asked what humanity wanted in return for friendship, he gave them an answer they did not expect. We want nothing from you except honesty, he said. We are not building an empire. We are building an alliance of equals. If that is what you want, you are welcome. If you are looking for a new master to replace the old one, look elsewhere. The Meridians stared at him. In 3,000 years of galactic politics, no major power had ever offered friendship without demanding submission in return. You truly mean this? Their leader asked. We mean it, Minho replied. We know what it feels like to be small and ignored. We will not do that to others. Back on Orion Prime, chaos continued to spread. High Arbiter Velkos held emergency meetings every day, but each meeting ended with fewer species remaining. Some withdrew quietly. Others announced their departure with angry speeches about council failures. A few simply stopped attending and refused to answer communications. Delegate Tora was among those who left. She had been sending information to human intelligence for weeks, sharing details about council military positions, political weaknesses, and internal conflicts. When she finally requested asylum, a human shuttle arrived within hours to pick her up. You understand that you can never go back, Captain Do-Hyun Lee told her as she boarded. The council will consider you a traitor. I was already a traitor, Tora replied. I just stopped pretending. Otherwise, the war faction of the council grew louder as others departed. Admiral Kreth of the Vorn Empire led the calls for military action. His species was proud and powerful, with a fleet that had crushed rebellions across 100 worlds. He could not accept that primitive humans had developed a weapon beyond his understanding. We strike now, he demanded at the final council session. Before they grow stronger, before they build more of these weapons, we destroy Earth and end this threat, forever. And if we fail? Someone asked. We will not fail, Kreth declared. They are one species against the might of the galaxy. Velkos hesitated. He knew the risks. But he also knew that if he did not act, the council would collapse completely. He needed a victory to restore faith in his leadership. Proceed, he said quietly. But be careful. The Vorn attack came without warning. A fleet of 200 warships struck 3 human outer colonies simultaneously. They expected minimal resistance. They expected to send a message. They were wrong. Admiral Una Park had prepared for this moment. Human ships that had seemed invisible appeared from nowhere, surrounding the Vorn fleets before they could retreat. 3 Vorn military installations vanished in the first hour. Not destroyed. Erased. Thousands of soldiers and hundreds of ships simply ceased to exist. The second wave of attacks hit 3 more installations, then 3 more. Admiral Kreeth watched his empire's military strength disappear, station by station. He screamed orders into his communication system, demanding reinforcements, demanding retreat, demanding something, anything. Dr. Hana Choi monitored the battle from her laboratory on Earth. Each use of her weapon registered on her screens. Each disappearance counted and recorded. She did not celebrate. She had created something terrible, and she would carry that weight for the rest of her life. But she also knew that this was the only way. The council would never have respected words. They only understood power. Ambassador Minho Kang received updates throughout the engagement. Between reports, he thought about his wife and daughter. He imagined Jisu's face, her gentle smile, the way she used to laugh at his jokes. He imagined Nari growing up, going to school, falling in love, having children of her own. None of that had happened. None of that would ever happen. Because the council had decided that human lives were worth less than their rules. Now they were learning that human anger was worth more than they had imagined. The war lasted 11 days. The Vorn Empire surrendered after losing 60% of their military infrastructure. Their proud fleet was shattered. Their installations were gone, and they had not inflicted a single confirmed casualty on Earth's forces. Admiral Kreth was found dead in his command center 3 days after the surrender. The official report said, equipment failure. Everyone knew he had taken his own life, rather than face the shame of defeat. The remaining council species watched in horror as the Vorn, the most militaristic species in the galaxy, was reduced to begging for peace. If the Vorn could not defeat humanity, no one could. High Arbiter Velkos sat alone in his chamber and stared at the wall. 3,000 years of leadership had led to this moment. The council he had built was crumbling. The power he had wielded was meaningless, and a species he had dismissed as primitive had humiliated everything he represented. His advisors told him there was only one option left. He would have to go to the humans himself. He would have to ask for peace. He would have to beg. Velkos closed his eyes and felt something he had not experienced in millennia: despair. High Arbiter Velkos arrived at the HSS New Sol on a cold morning in standard galactic time. His ship was small, carrying only himself and 2 advisors. He had left his guards behind. He had left his pride behind. He came as a beggar, not a ruler. Ambassador Minho Kang met him in the main conference room. Admiral Una Park stood beside the ambassador, her face showing nothing. Dr. Hana Choi was there as well, the scientist who had built the weapon that had brought the galaxy to its knees. And in the corner, Delegate Tora watched silently. She had been given a place in the human delegation, the first non-human to serve Earth in an official capacity. Velkos looked around the room at these people who had destroyed everything he had built. They were so young. Their species was barely a moment old compared to his own long life, and yet they had done what no other species had managed in 30,000 years. They had broken the council. I have come to discuss peace, Velkos said. His voice was tired, empty of the authority it once held. The council is prepared to accept terms. What do you want from us? Minho studied the ancient being before him. For 15 years, he had imagined this moment. He had dreamed of making the council suffer, of forcing them to feel even a fraction of the pain they had caused. But now that the moment was here, he felt only sadness. Revenge was empty. It could not bring back his wife. It could not return his daughter's laughter. It could only create more pain in a universe that already had too much. 300 years ago, Minho began slowly. Humanity reached for the stars. Velkos said nothing. He remembered those early days. He remembered the debates about how to classify the new species. He remembered voting to restrict them. Instead, you found us. Minho continued. You told us we were primitive. You locked us in our own solar system. You hid the void gates and pretended they did not exist. And when we tried to grow anyway, you burned our colonies and killed our children. The words hung in the air like smoke. You offered negotiation only when you wanted submission, Minho said. You offered peace only when you wanted control. For 3 centuries, we had no choice but to accept whatever you gave us. He stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the stars. Now we don't need your welcome. We don't need your approval. And we certainly don't need to negotiate. The galaxy isn't yours to gatekeep anymore. Velkos closed his eyes. Then what happens now? Do you destroy us completely? No. Minho turned back to face him. We are not like you. We will not become the monsters you tried to make us into. He returned to his seat and placed a document on the table between them. Earth is establishing a new alliance. We're calling it the Terran Confederation. It will be open to any species that wants to join, with full equality for all members. No tiers. No restrictions. No masters and servants. Velkos looked at the document. His hands trembled slightly as he picked it up. The Void Gate network will be open to everyone, Minho continued. Not just council species. Every civilization in the galaxy will have access to the stars. The secrets you've been hoarding for millennia will be shared freely. And the council? The council can continue to exist if it wishes, but it will have no authority over Earth or any Confederation member. You will be one voice among many, not the only voice that matters. Velkos set the document down. For a long moment, he simply stared at it. This is not peace, he said finally. This is the end of everything we built. No, Admiral Unipark spoke for the first time. This is the beginning of something better. You built a galaxy based on fear and control. We're offering a galaxy based on choice and freedom. The difference is that our way lets everyone grow. The negotiations lasted 3 more hours. In the end, Velkos signed the agreement. He had no choice. The alternative was watching the remaining council species flee to join the Confederation anyway. 6 months later, the galaxy had transformed. The Terran Confederation grew every week as new species joined. Some were former council members who had seen the writing on the wall. Others were civilizations that had been ignored for centuries, finally given a place at the table. Admiral Unipark became the first guardian of the Confederation fleet. She spent her days training officers from dozens of species, teaching them to work together as equals. Dr. Hana Choi returned to pure research. She never built another weapon. Instead, she focused on using Void Gate technology for peaceful purposes, opening pathways to parts of the universe no one had ever explored. Ambassador Minho Kang continued his diplomatic work. He never stopped missing his family, but he found purpose in building something they would have been proud of. Delegate Tora became the first non-human ambassador to serve Earth directly. She represented all the species who had been overlooked and forgotten, proof that the Confederation meant what it said about equality. Commander Sora Jin stood on the bridge of the HSS Defiance, watching as ships from a dozen species passed through a void gate that had been closed to them for millennia. Former slaves, refugees, forgotten peoples, all of them entering the stars that had been stolen from them. Lieutenant Junho Baek stood beside her. Sora watched the ships disappear into the gate, one by one, carrying families toward new lives. We didn't refuse to negotiate, she said. We refused to beg. There's a difference. Junho considered this. What's the difference? Negotiation means both sides have something the other wants. Begging means one side has all the power and the other has nothing. Sora smiled slightly. We just made sure we